No one gets married with a plan to separate from their spouse, yet close to 50% of marriages end in divorce. Most people going through separation desire a respectful and fair process for themselves, the children and their partner, but knowing how to create this kind of outcome means finding the right support at the optimum time for your needs. Welcome to the Separation Guide podcast. I'm your host, Sabina Read. I'm a psychologist, media commentator, podcast host, and life Sherpa. And my passion is to create moments of connection, hope, freedom, and joy while normalising the whole gamut of emotions that exist in all of us. What I know for sure is that we all share more in common than we do differences. And when we find common ground with others, it helps us to navigate even the toughest of days. Together with our online platform, theseparationguide.com.au, this podcast is your go-to resource for all things separation and divorce. Our aim is to walk alongside you to help remove some of the cost, conflict and confusion for people navigating the end of a marriage. Today on the podcast, we are joined by Arabella Feltham from the Separation Guide. Arabella is our separation consultant at the Separation Guide, where she oversees all the practice management for our guided separation mediations with all mediators nationally. She's also studying to be a mediator herself. Our data tells us that women are more often the instigators of separation. In many cases, they've already been through their own grieving process prior to initiating separation, which can leave many men feeling blindsided and unprepared, as well as shocked, angry, fearful and distressed. On this episode, we explore how to support men to work through their own grief and prepare themselves for the many layers of separation that lie ahead. We deep dive some of the differences between how men and women experience the love, sadness and anger cycle. And we discuss Arabella's observation of the increasing men she consults with who are challenged by addiction and mental health concerns in the aftermath of separation. If you're a man asking yourself, why didn't I see this coming? What supports are available for me? How can I garner support from my workplace? Who is here to walk alongside me as I process the separation and divorce journey? What can I do to minimise conflict? How can I cultivate an ongoing connection with my kids? How does the mindset impact healing? And what does a so-called good separation look like? Then this chat will speak loudly to you. However, if separation is not on the table for you, but you sense relationship pain is brewing and you'd like to stay ahead of the curve for yourself, your partner and the relationship, then there are many potent takeaways in this chat for you too. We also chat about the challenges of being a fly-in, fly-out or even shift worker, which can create more specific pressures on a relationship with so much time apart. Everything from sexual dynamics to the division of labour require transparent conversations, but balancing autonomy with intimacy can be tricky to navigate. We offer up tips on goal alignment, communication, household routines, and how to create softer departures and arrivals back into the marital and family fold. And finally, if you're a woman listening to this episode, but you know a man who is in need right now, we invite you to share this episode with the men you know who are seeking support and hope, recognition of their needs, and a desire for understanding and validation, as well as practical resources and a guiding light when the path ahead can feel dimly lit. Welcome to the Separation Guide podcast, Arabella.
Thanks for having me.
There's a lot of research that tells us, at least in hetero-Western marriages, that women catalyse the majority of divorces. And your personal observations at the Separation Guide concur. What do you think your explanation is of this pattern?
So there's a lot of research in this and why women are more statistically likely to initiate a separation. There's a number of very clever people out there that have researched the psychology of men and women and where they come at from this standpoint. We're seeing a lot of different age groups that are separating at the moment. within those age groups, there's different dynamic and relationship dynamics. So when we look at an older, what we call more of a grey divorce, there perhaps has been a division of labour in the relationship that maybe isn't prevalent in some of our younger relationships. Maybe just with the economic crisis, there isn't that power imbalance or that dynamic difference. And many women just come to it and the dynamic is no longer working for them. There was a researcher that said men are typically happier to exist in a status quo relationship and women are not. And that's certainly something that I hear coming through from my female clients, just saying, I'm unhappy and things need to change. And I deal then with a lot of men coming to me saying, this has come out of the blue for me and I don't know what to do next.
Women have different expectations, or are they different needs, do you think, emotionally in a long-term relationship? What's happening there?
What I hear coming through, a lot of my female clients come to me and they often use this particular phrase. They say, I've done a lot of work on myself over the years. And that sentence is not something that I hear reflected in my male clients a lot. And what that tells me is that women are more likely to reach out to friends, family, communities, groups, and professionals and support some of the emotional journeys that they've gone through with that advice along the way. And I think that there is a dynamic in society as well that encourages women to reach out and get that support. And equally, I think there's a narrative that men shouldn't or can't, or that they don't, and it reinforces that energy that they don't reach out for support. And so I think women are more likely to perhaps initiate because they recognize what's not working for them emotionally. They go and speak to the professionals, they go and do some of that work, and then they look to make changes in their own life or their relationship that perhaps their partner is not ready for and not able to go on that new journey with them.
And yet something that I saw in my many years as a relationship therapist, and what I know for sure is that we all bleed the same. And I've sat with many couples over the years and also many individuals, men and women. And we all experience the same emotions, the emotions of love and grief and anger and fear. What do you think some of the differences are in the way men and women process and express those kinds of emotions?
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad you brought up grief. It's something that I talk to my clients a lot about because there's a real misconception out there. So we often, when we think of grief in society and in our world, we think of the 5 stages of grief, which actually doesn't represent the grief that we experience in a separation at all. So we look at a completely different grief model for people, and we focus on 3 main emotions. So it's love and sadness and anger. And you're right, we all bleed the same. We all experience those 3 main emotions in a separation. And I often say where we get that conflict between people is when they're experiencing a different spike of a different emotion at the same time as their partner. So one person's in that real sadness stage, and the other person has cycled into anger. And we just sort of get that clash of the emotions coming through. But men and women will cycle through each of them all the same. But coming to how we respond in this situation, when we're under an intense amount of pressure, and we know that separation is the second most stressful life event that someone can go through, when you're that stressed, we slip into our base communication style. So if we have a natural sense to withdraw or a natural sense to punch out and attack first, or then what we will find is not only coupled with the grief and the sadness and the love that we're cycling through, we're actually also going to slip into our natural communication style. And for men, statistically, what we see is that they fall quite quickly into that sadness space where they feel that this is happening to them and that they have no control over that. So that's one of the main ways I see men and women tackling that emotion differently.
Which begs the question for the men who are listening, and also for people listening who love men who may not be listening. What are some of your tips or strategies that can help us dial up that sense of control, perceived or real?
this is a really hard one to tackle because a lot of clients come to me and they want the answer, the one thing that's going to make them feel better about everything that's happening. And there is no one answer. And separation is a learning curve. And some of that learning curve is about how to set boundaries for yourself that make you more comfortable, about reaching out and getting support when you recognize that you're struggling. And about understanding that you do have choices in this position. So I think what I would say to any men that are listening is the first and foremost, you're not alone in this. There are people, there are men, there are women, there are professionals, there are people that have gone through this before or have awareness around what you're experiencing. Reach out to them, use them. Many men that come to me perhaps don't have the friend and family connection, in which case I cannot stress enough the need for you to get some professional support along the way. And the other thing that I would get them to really try to recognize, even though it's really hard, is that you have choices in this. This is not making the choice to de-escalate, making the choice to focus on the children and make this as smooth as possible, despite everyone being in so much pain. That is a choice that you get to make every day. And even though it's hard, it is a choice that you have in front of you that you get to make.
And it's empowering to come back to that choice and also remind ourselves we do have a choice, because often it doesn't feel that way when we're feeling rock bottom, which probably leads me to deep dive something that I imagine you see quite a lot of, and that's patterns of addiction, patterns of poor mental health, particularly in men who either are anticipating separation, going through it, or going through divorce. What are some of the things that you see there around addiction and mental health?
Yeah. So if I focus on mental health first, this is a massive one. So we partner with an amazing organization named Talked. And we also partner with some fabulous divorce coaches that support men specifically in going through, where that's what they've focused their careers on, helping to understand their journey. So in terms of mental health, I can't stress enough to reach out to the right professionals, but I've had my fair share of tears on calls from my male clients where I had one client say to me, this is the most amount of pain he's ever felt without needing to be hospitalized. That's where his next step felt like. So of course, mental health is such a big part of this conversation. And like I said earlier, it's not always seen, particularly by men, that it's appropriate or okay for them to go and get that help. And I had one client say to me, "Oh, I'm from North England. We don't do that," when I spoke about speaking with a psychologist. And that just made me so sad, because I know and could recognize how much pain he was in. And we can't get out of that pain all alone. We need support. So in terms of mental health, when I'm speaking to people, please reach out. If it's practical support you need, therapeutic support, I'll point you in the right direction. Let's just get you some of the support so you've got people to talk to along this way.
That's reassuring. I know it will be for a lot of our listeners as well, particularly for those men that feel completely blindsided. So as you said, women are far more the initiators of separation. And I guess some men that you work with and some that I've been in contact with myself will kind of have a sense that something wasn't feeling right. But there are other men who I've heard countless men say, "I had no idea. We never had a discussion. We didn't go to therapy together. I actually felt like things were sort of ticking along okay." For those who are listening who are in that acute stage of shock, what do you think they can do in this moment?
Yeah. So in this, the most common thing that I see happen is men who they're completely blindsided, is they slip into, like I said, that baseline of communication. So this is when I see clients panic. So this is when I see clients move money, or when I see clients pick the kids up from school unexpectedly and go and sit in a cafe and have a coffee. I see, when they feel that not only is their marriage being taken away from them, they have this fear now that everything else is going to be taken away. So all I would say to them is try not to panic in that moment. Recognize that you need that support and that help, and reach out and get information early, because knowledge, I say this to a lot of my clients, knowledge in a separation is not power. It's comfort. It makes you feel more comfortable when you can understand what's going to happen. I deal with a lot of men that feel their children, they're going to become that Disney dad. Their children will be taken away from them. They're only going to see them every second weekend, Thursday and Saturday. And when they understand and have the knowledge that that's not the way it works, and they will have some choices and some agency, and they'll be able to put what they want forward, it can help them to not go through those moments of panic and feeling powerless. So reach out early, get some support, and get some information as well so that you can understand what will happen next.
And you're talking about us going back to our base form of communication when we're in a state of fear. And so the patterns that have probably been occurring in the marriage are going to be occurring at this acute stage, but on steroids, as you say. If you've been an abuser, if you've been a fighter, if you've been a blamer, if you've been a stonewaller, they're going to see these dial up in ways that they haven't served the marriage well, and they're not going to serve the separation well either.
No, absolutely. And I do a lot of support with helping people in these early days. So I try to help people understand the stage of separation they're in. A lot of people approach me when they're in limbo. So they've had the discussion and they haven't started having any agreements forming. They haven't had any of those difficult long-term conversations. They're just in this survival stage. And this is my most nerve-wracking stage for clients. This is where they need the most communication support. And it's little things. It's framing of sentences and taking the words, I think, out of your repertoire and moving more to, this is an option for us. It needs to work for both of us. What are your thoughts? And helping people to start to change some of the communication strategies. Because I often say the communication strategies we had, they got us here. Yeah. Something's not working. We have to change them to have a better tomorrow and a better conversation tomorrow.
And that requires us to take our blinkers off. And it's a phrase that I sometimes use, is to meander down the path of possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that phrase. That is lovely.
It's kind of poetic as well, but I think,
it's lovely.
I think it packs a punch. So you're talking about a lot of men who haven't tapped in, either don't have or don't feel they have or don't know how to access supports in their world, personal and professional supports. What about in the workplace? Because so many of us, men and women, spend a lot of time in the workplace, and yet I've seen many people, maybe more men than women, feel like that's a place where they really need to put their mask on and get busy doing what they're employed to do. What are some of your thoughts on how we can utilise the workplace, including our boss, as a resource at this time?
Yeah, one of the most amazing experiences in being part of the Separation Guide, particularly in the last year and a bit, is starting to have some of those conversations with organizations to say, this is how you can help your employees that are going through a really stressful life event. And having those employers come to us and go, we really like this. We want to help our employees. How can we help them through this? One thing in a big survey that we put out recently, there was a huge rate of people leaving their roles after a separation because they felt so unsupported and they just didn't know what to do next. There was no one to talk to. So the biggest thing I would say to people out there in general going through separation, but particularly speaking to men who maybe don't feel comfortable speaking to anybody, is don't see your employers these days as the enemy and that you can't speak to them. Approach your manager. You don't have to go into specifics with them, but you can say, I'm having a really hard time at home at the moment. There are some changes happening in my life. I need a bit of support. I need to understand how our EAP supports me. And in a larger company, they will have EAP components that can support you. Some of it might be the separation guide, and otherwise you can approach your organization and see what they do have. And for the smaller organizations, just letting your manager or the HR manager understand what's going on can help them to help you manage your workload, because now might be not the time to take on that major project, but you want to be a part of it. So how can we help you be a part of it that's not going to completely overwhelm this other major thing happening in your life? Because one of the things that people are not always prepared for is that separation in and itself can feel like a full-time job, but a really stressful, emotional one. And so how do you focus on that full-time job plus having your full-time job? Well, something has to give for your own mental health. And that's where bringing your employer into the know can just help you to really manage that workload going forward.
Something else I know for sure is that we tend to know more of what we need than anyone else knows about us. And yet we skip around it, we dial it down, we quash it, and maybe in some kind of hopeful manner think perhaps someone else knows more of what I need than I need. But in hearing what you've just said, I think if we were able to take the time to think about what do I need right now with my working self? Are there any specific modifications or requests or flexibility that would help me turn up at work while still navigating this painful time, instead of thinking, is there a sort of set and forget response from my employer, because they don't know what you need at this
Exactly. And look, it can be as simple as I just need some leeway in terms of deadlines or getting to and from work at the moment. And it can be those immediate emotions that they're going through that the employer can help you create a roadmap for yourself or help listen to the roadmap that you need to put in place. But it can be more long-term than that as well, which is why we say talk to them, have the open conversation, because when you start forming an agreement, you will probably have lent on your partner or your former partner in various ways over the years, and that might no longer be appropriate. And a really simple one is picking the kids up from school. Whose day is it to pick the kids up? Well, my meeting's running late. I can't get out. And where I would normally have called X to go and do that, I don't feel comfortable doing that now. So having that flexibility or having that communication with your work to say, I can't have this meeting run over, I have to go, can help you to manage some of those day-to-day changes that you're going to experience in a more long-term way as well. And having a conversation around, I need some flexibility to pick the kids up from school, is a very different conversation from them approaching you saying, you've left work at 4:30 5 times in the last 2 weeks. Why is that? Let them know what's going on.
We've also talked about fear as being a major emotion at this time, and you did mention when you're in that kind of primal fight or flight state that you've seen people rush to have coffee with their kids or try and hold on tighter perhaps, instead of thinking how we could shift the dynamics here to create new dynamics as a separated couple. What are some of the tips you've got around fathers especially who are wanting so very much to cultivate a relationship with their kids? And of course there'll be some age differences depending on the developmental needs of the kids here. But what can I do as a dad when I want to have a relationship with my children, and maybe I haven't been overly present, maybe I haven't been the kind of dad I can be and want to be? So now I'm also rethinking, not just holding on to patterns of the past as a parent, but moving forward with new ideas and new dynamics and new patterns.
Yeah, amazing. So the biggest thing I would say to my fathers, I speak to father, 86% of the people that come to us are parents. There's children involved in it. So it's a huge percentage. So I'm speaking to a lot of fathers. And like I said, there's often that fear. And when I first started, to be honest, I actually thought women would be very focused on the children and men would be very focused perhaps on some of the financial structures. And actually in my own learnings, I actually saw that completely swap. And that's a comfort thing, a stereotypical, this may not reflect your relationship out there, whoever's listening, but something that we see stereotypically is that perhaps men have had some comfort in managing the finances and women have had comfort in managing the caregiving responsibilities. So women feel really comfortable with their relationship with children, and men, maybe, like you said, maybe they haven't been, not necessarily less present, just they haven't run the day-to-day activities of the caregiving that their partner might have. And so I see that dynamic a lot. One thing I would say to my fathers out there, and I have this conversation with them a lot, is keeping a focus on the best interests of the children throughout this process is really important to helping you have that really great relationship with them. So what do I mean by that? I mean that in a separation, we're not always our best selves, and we can maybe flare up or have a disagreement with our former partner and get upset or emotional. And the children don't necessarily need to witness that event to experience it. Okay, so what I would say to my fathers is, and my mothers, but to be very aware of the transitions between when they're moving from mum to dad or dad to mum. Be very aware of how the two of you are interacting at that point, because the children, no matter which age, they're experiencing that. The other thing I say to my parents is we want as much as possible to keep little ears out of our separation. We don't want them involved in this at all. Now's not the time to be having conversations that are not age appropriate. And it's certainly not the time to be disparaging either parent in any way, shape or form. And sometimes children pick up sentences and they bring it to you and you think, oh, you know, that's really horrible that my former partner said that to the children about me. That's not a time for you to do a tit for tat. That's a time for you to create a safe environment for the children to say, thank you for bringing that to me. I'll talk to mum or dad about that. You don't need to worry about that. Do you have any questions? Keep a nice, safe, open environment for them to be able to approach you with their questions, and don't involve them unnecessarily in your separation. Mm-hmm. And you might find that the children pull away from you for a while as they try to work out what the new dynamics are in the family. But if you keep that door open for them, they will take the invite. It might just take a little bit of time.
What can I do if I feel like I have been leaning in and yet they are rejecting me? They're favouring time with their mother. This is applying to older children who have capacity and capability around choice and can say, I don't want to spend time at your house, or I don't want to sleep over at your house. I don't want to, follow a set rule every week. I'm more comfortable where I am with mum.
Yeah, this is a really tough one. And there's so much that's dependent on my answer. So if I focus more on the older age bracket, so what we know about maybe about 14 to 17, we do see them start to become quite focused on their own worlds. They're working out what their lives look like in the separation. To a degree, you could almost call them a little bit selfish, and during the separation, they want to know how it's all going to impact them and their changes in their friendship groups. And that's when we can see them start to pull away from a particular parent. Again, keep that door nice and open for them. Seek support, get some mental health professional advice around ways that you can re-engage with them. Invite them to participate with you, not in ways that service you, but service them, and have a conversation with them, an open one, about what that means. You know, is it that, are you pulling away? Is my house too far away? Is my house too cold? Is it too uncomfortable? Is it too far from your friends? You know, do you want me to come to the ball game? Do you not want me to? Why do you not want me to? Have these open conversations with your children. They are starting to form their own independent worlds as well. So how can you participate in a way that is meaningful to them, not necessarily meaningful to you and what you want? And in a more severe and maybe escalated situation, and there's a real divide between the parent and child, And let's say I've got a situation where both parents are on board and they both recognize the divide and they don't know how to repair it. That's when you might need some maybe child inclusive mediation to support hearing and a safe environment for them to convey some of their emotions with you. So you can actually have that in a safe way for them. But yeah, just coming back to, if I'm not in that more severe case, then work out what the parameters of the relationship that they would like to have with you.
There's some really sound advice there, and I think I've experienced and observed quite a few fathers who have just felt so hurt and so despondent and so frustrated and so perplexed when they feel they've put their best foot forward and repeatedly it's rejected. So there's something there I can hear you saying, Arabella, around. I really liked what you said around looking at this through, it's obvious, but the lens of the child's needs, not your own needs. And there may be some simple modifications there around, as you say, that the house or the setting that they don't feel comfortable in, that you're able to change.
Exactly. And it's about creating an environment, a conversation with them, and to make it ongoing. Don't make this build it up to be this big, if we don't fix this today, we don't have a relationship anymore, because that's not the case. You're going to be a parent forever. So make this an ongoing conversation. Allow them to feel safe to bring issues to you or bring solutions to you that, it says, hey, I have this at mum's and it really bothers me that I don't have it at yours. And instead of going, well, I lost that and having that moment where that's just coming from pain and upset, have a conversation, say, well, look, let's talk about how we can make that easier for you. Let's talk about it. And that would be the biggest thing I would say. But I completely hear you. I have so many fathers that are in pain and don't know how to connect with their children. Be patient. It would be you're not going to form that relationship overnight and it's all going to fix itself. Be understanding that they have a point of view as well, and provide space for them to come to that conversation and also to exit that conversation. One thing that I talk to parents a lot about when they're having the discussion with their children that separation is going to take place in the family, provide them with an exit. We teach children to be polite a lot. There's a real emphasis on that, which often means that they don't or haven't yet developed the skills to exit a conversation that's making them uncomfortable in a graceful way. Even in this conversation, maybe if you know that they haven't overly been communicative with you or been able to communicate with you openly, don't look for a response on the day. Bring some of these things and say, look, this is just how I've been feeling. I'm really open to hearing your thoughts and about improving this. But if you're uncomfortable, you can go and watch TV and that's okay. I'm going to sit here and just wait just in case you have some questions. And when you're ready, if you're ready, please, I'd love to hear from you. Provide them an exit that is clean for them.
I think that advice and that insight stands for not just children, but for anyone that we're in a potentially high conflict scenario with. To provide a graceful exit means that they are also there by choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And to recognize when the conversation has run its course.
For now.
For now, exactly.
Yeah.
You asked me about addiction earlier, and I thought I would just loop back to that one to make sure I did tackle it. It is something that I am seeing more of at the moment. I am seeing more people come to me, and their addiction, whether it be drugs, alcohol, or gambling, is a real component to the separation. What we know is that with separation being so stressful, if there has been a pattern of addiction in the past, these people are highly at risk of falling back into those patterns now. So if you know that there's some separation is going to be taking place in your life and there has been some of these patterns, please try to self-identify that and get the help early. Get back into those resources that helped you to remove those patterns in the past. But if the pattern is already taken hold and we are finding that you're going through a separation and there is addiction prevalent as well, I still want you to get the support, but also when we're looking at services like mediation or working with lawyers, now's not the time to sugarcoat any of that. Let's be open and frank with this. Use them as a resource that is on your side to help you get through this as much as possible. So hiding it is just simply not going to help you in the long run.
What do I do if I feel like that was going to be used against me? I share some kind of vulnerability. I share that it's a pain point for me at this time. I'm working on it. I'm aware. I've got insight. And now it's thrown back at me.
Yeah, this is a huge one. I had a matter where the gambling component of the mediation came out right towards the end because in this instance, it was the husband that had the gambling in the past. He just felt like he was going to be punished for it. All I would say in that instance for that particular matter that we had, that actually caused the mediation to have to retake place, but this time with lawyers. And it actually ended up going for another 6 months. So I completely understand there's so much fear in being vulnerable, particularly for men, and bringing something so honest to the table. Separating is about reestablishing ourselves and reforming what our life is going to look like next and what we want it to look like. And so my advice doesn't change. I completely hear what you're saying, Sabina, that there's that fear and concern, but my advice doesn't change. Now is the time that we have to be open about it. Otherwise, it's just going to kick us down the track and make this more expensive and more stressful. And it all comes out. It really does in a separation. So feel empowered and feel safe as much as you can to bring it to the table early. And if you don't feel empowered and safe, then that's where we start. Let's get you the resources. Let's get you the knowledge. Let's get you the people that are going to make you feel empowered and safe. And then let's take those resources on the journey with you.
I can hear very loudly that, and I know this with the work I've done as a consultant and pod host now with the Separation Guide. The Separation Guide resources are a non-judgmental place to turn. And sometimes it's hard for us to believe that when we're bleeding. We think, who's going to kick me while I'm down? Mm-hmm. Who's going to tell me I've done the wrong thing? Who's going to play the blame game? I'm already doing that enough with myself. So there's something around this non-judgmental support for men, for women, for the initiator, for the responder, for the parent, for the non-parent. This is a place that is safe to hold the space and help you move from A to B, and then B to C, and C to D until we get to Z, and round we go again, because such is the nature of human change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when there's such a vulnerability for men coming through, they have so much fear around how this is all going to look. And the resources that we have, like you said, they're not judgmental. We're not here to kick you while you're down. But education is a huge part of this process to make it smoother for you and to get you through it that little bit faster, to help you get to the other side and start building those relationships with your children again, to start going on that healing pattern that's going to help you, move on.
We will also have people listening who are not in the throes of separation or divorce, but perhaps there's a sense that there are some cracks in my relationship that I don't want that chasm to widen. Mm-hmm. What are some of the preventative, proactive strategies and also mindset, I think I would say here, that can help me so I can perhaps get ahead of the curve and maybe mitigate the risks or chances of separation or divorce?
Yeah, I have a lot of clients that come to me and they're on the fence, as I say. They really don't know which way to go. Do they want reconciliation? Do they want separation? What I say to people is that no one can make that decision for you. That is a decision. And if you go and speak with a friend or a therapist or a separation consultant or a lawyer, and they are very much telling you to leave, that's a personal choice. So, take that with a grain of salt. But what I say is, whether it's reconciliation or separation, the journey is tough. Reconciliation is not just not separating. Right. So if you're recognizing that in your relationship, there's dynamics that you don't like, there's a power imbalance, there's a dynamic, there's a division of labor that's, making you unhappy, bring it to the table early and get some support. And I have a lot of people come to me and they say, we've already tried counseling. And I almost sometimes want to say, you've tried counseling with one person, and finding a therapist that fits the couple's needs is so important. And if you truly want to reconcile, something has to change. So rather than just saying counseling, check, we tried it, what else? Let's relook at that, because to me, you are going to need some support, and an impartial and an external person looking in to guide you to those better communication strategies. And if you approach your partner and say, look, this is what I'm identifying, and you get a real, no, I'm not interested in any of reconciliation, I'm not interested in going to counseling, no, I'm not doing that, then maybe that is when you start on that fence, moving a little bit more to separation, because you haven't got a willing participant. And to reconcile it takes both of you to make that decision, whereas separation just takes one of you to make that call. So get the help early with the right professional.
And I'd also like to chime in there, just as with my psychologist and relationship therapy hat on, that couples therapy is very different to individual therapy. When you go as an individual into therapy, the therapist is aligning with you and listening to your story and your perspective and your needs. And that can be a very powerful space to be, and very affirming, because they are walking alongside just you. And there's a space for that. There's a place. Couples therapy is hearing two perspectives. And the other thing that I find very powerful about couples therapy is that each partner or ex-partner is also bearing witness to the story of the other. So the process of couples versus individual therapy I see as wildly different. And I think there's scope for both. And I wonder, you probably talk to countless clients who have perhaps only taken one path or the other. And I think they need to walk parallel paths, ideally, around couple and individual therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see when you what you were talking then about, how it's about taking two people's truths and hearing their perspectives. And that can be a really painful process to go through. And I see a lot of similarities between actually the way mediators work and the way relationship counselors work. It isn't about truth hunting. It's not about getting to the person that is right. It's about hearing each of your perspectives and finding the healthy middle ground between the two of you. And I guess with relationship therapy, it is very much about what's the middle ground that's going to allow both of your truths to exist and allow the relationship to continue in a healthy way. And in a separation, it's about allowing those truths to exist and you not resent each other after your separation. So they're very similar concepts. You're almost doing the same work, but you're just getting a slightly different outcome at the end.
What do you think the gold star of separation looks like? What is the best practice of separation if we wanted to be the best separator we can be? If we've got to the point and we're acknowledging that the choice of separation is where we're at, what would that look like?
Okay. So it's funny you say that, what's the best version? I say to my clients, a lot of clients, I do a lot of prep work to help them have the conversation about separation, or early communication work to help them de-escalate things and reframe their sentences. And they have a lot of fear in actually saying the words. And I always say, I've never had a client reach back out to me and say, I nailed it. I did nothing wrong. We got it all right. We could do it again. That was how simple it was. So there are going to be times that you step in the, go in the wrong direction, or you say the thing you shouldn't have said. So I would say to people, the gold star of separating is to be very kind to yourself and to recognize you're not going to get everything right, and to not give yourself too much of a smack when you're going through this process. You say, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Move on from it. It's been said now. Let's just, keep working. So, some of the basic principles that I give people on how to do this well is keep the kids as much out of it as possible. But in speaking with your partner, I say be clear in your language. You know, why am I saying this sentence to them? What am I trying to have them understand? Be really clear in your messaging. Write it down and practice it if you need to, but be really clear. And be really kind in your language choices with them. There's no amount of litigating. If we have made the decision to separate, there's no amount of litigating how we got here that's actually going to help us to make the decisions for tomorrow. So am I being clear? Am I being kind? Do the research early. Get the knowledge, so get the comfort so you understand how this process is going to work. Reach out and speak to someone like myself, like a separation consultant, who can just help you put the steps in order and work out what that next stepping stone down the garden path, like you were saying, looks like to you. And then provide space for both of your experiences and the pain that you're going through. So one of the things, and this comes back to whether you're responding or initiating to a separation, my initiators have felt a lot of the pain. They've had that turmoil in their minds. They've now had the discussion about separating, and in some ways they feel that there's something off their chest and they feel a little clearer about things. They become I can always tell when I'm speaking to an initiator, they have a huge checklist of things they want to achieve in a very short amount of time. And that's absolutely fine. My responders, though, their pain, their mental turmoil, that's starting from the point that you've had the discussion with them. So providing them a space, and statistically women, like we said, they're more likely to initiate. So now I'm speaking largely to a cohort of respondents that are men. I advise my female clients to provide space for the men to grieve. Allow them time to feel their pain, be okay that they're not going to be able to make all the decisions you want them to make, and be understanding and patient with each other while you both experience this journey of pain, of grief, and perhaps sometimes of relief when decisions get made and agreements formed, but provide each other that space to experience this journey.
And there's a very different cadence here for the initiator and the respondent, where, as you just said, the initiator has been, if not practically, maybe even unconsciously, processing what this would feel like, where would I live, what would my life look like, how would it feel? And the respondent is playing catch up. I haven't considered any of this. I haven't imagined it. I can't imagine it. And I imagine, well, I've seen, and you've seen, a lot of these initiators, as you just said, want to rush this process along because they are finally ready and they've finally pulled the trigger. So let's get this show on the road.
Yep.
So there's something very important there about slowing down, knowing that you've arrived at a place where it's kind of non-negotiable for you, but there's a catch-up that needs to be honoured.
Yeah.
In our partner, without being fearful that catch-up will mean you will be pulled back into a hole. Because I think often once we've made a decision, we don't want anyone to challenge us, move forward. We've got a vision, we've got a roadmap, and we want everyone on board.
Yeah, I completely hear what you're saying with the difference in the cadence. And to be honest, in my experience, that checkbox of I want my ducks in a row, I need to understand what's going on from my initiator, and that I need everything to slow down, I can't think, from my responders. Both of that often comes from fear and grief. Fear from my initiators going, if I don't get the ducks in a row, it'll never get done. Or if I don't get it in ducks in a row, I won't have agency in the choices that we make.
I'm ready now.
I'm ready. Exactly. And my respondents just need everything to slow down a little bit. And I think this now comes into the communication during this limbo phase. So when I'm working with clients in limbo, I say we make no long-term arrangements in limbo, because quite often this is when we are our least knowledgeable about separating and how it works. We're at our most stressful in this process because everything is up in the air. So let's focus on our survival needs. Where are we both living? Is that separated under the same roof, which is very common these days? If so, what are the new ground rules? Do we cook for each other? Do we clean for each other? Let's just focus on this survival concept for a little while, these survival needs. And then we can get help such as mediation to help us navigate some of those more long-term decisions.
Mm-hmm. Can I go somewhere a little more specifically before we finish up today? And that is the world of fly in, fly out, or drive in, drive out work-life dynamics, and particularly how that sits within the separation space. Already being a fly in, fly out worker is going to create some challenges in our emotional and physical intimacy, in the routines and rhythms of a household, in our communication style, in how we parent, because we're thrown into two worlds, one where I'm in charge here while you're away, and now you've returned and you are trying to re-navigate your foothold here. So this is quite I think a vulnerable place for a lot of relationships. Tell me about your experience with fly in, fly out workers, whether they're considering or planning a separation.
Yeah, a huge amount of the of FIFO workers approach us. So there's a couple of industries that really approach us quite a lot. We look at that FIFO, so mining, and also the emergency services, where there's that shift work, which is quite a similar element. And for this, what we primarily, like you said, we look at that division. The issues have come with a division of labor. So someone's the primary worker, someone's the primary home runner of everything. These tension points arise, and then all of a sudden we move into that separated space, and the person that has perhaps run the lives and they've been the caregiver and been the homebody, they try to then run the separation. And this is a similar initiator versus responder situation. We have to still provide space for the other person to participate, and incrementally so, if that's what it is. But yes, we see a huge number of FIFO workers and shift workers come through the separation guide, because it just is another element to the relationship that adds so much stress and pressure to these families. And often it can make the separation very stressful to manage, but it doesn't have to be. Again, let's get the education early. Let's get the support early. Let's set some clear communication ground rules early, and all of these things will help for people in a FIFO situation where they don't have those strong communication strategies with each other, and it will help them form them for the future.
And before we go, let's leave our listeners with a final message from your wisdom and your experience working with countless clients, particularly for our male clients. What do they need to hear to feel seen, to feel safe, to feel hopeful?
All I would say to them is it's normal to feel frustrated and powerless and perhaps a bit angry about some of these things, and to feel like this is all happening to you, but you are not alone. There are people that can absolutely support you every step of the way. Be brave and reach out for that support, and know that you will not be punished for being vulnerable during this really stressful time. So reach out. The support is there, and it can take you through every step of this journey.
That's a hopeful message. And to reiterate what you said earlier today, choose kindness, choose grace for yourself.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Arabella. I think it's an important conversation to have. I'm well aware of the optics of two women discussing what it's like for a man. And I want to honour that we acknowledge that we're not men. We're not in this conversation. But I hope what's conveyed, and I know for sure for both of us, there's a level of compassion and empathy around what we see. And we want that to shift.
Absolutely. It's certainly something that like I said, I'm not a man, but I want to be considered that safe space for them to be able to come and speak to me. And that's what I've spent the last 5 years doing. So, if you are out there and you need to speak to somebody, you will feel heard when you come and speak to us or engage with us, and you will not be judged. There's no story you bring to me that I haven't heard before, I promise you. So let's just navigate with what's going on for you and try to help you through it.
Thank you, Arabella. Well said.
Thanks for having me.
At the Separation Guide, we measure our success by our ability to keep you out of conflict and get through separation in the best possible way, protecting your long-term health, wealth, and happiness. The Separation Guide plan provides you with step-by-step guidance on all stages of separation and aims to empower you with the knowledge, expert resources, skills, and strategies to take each step with confidence. Every specialist attached to our platform is measured on their ability to do the same, and everyone signs an ethical charter showing we all believe that court should be seen as a last resort. If you'd like to learn more about your options in separation or you want to be put in touch with professionals to guide you through, please go to theseparationguide.com.au and complete our 3-minute interactive Q&A, or check out our other podcasts and blogs. If you found the information today useful, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It's a great way to help our podcast reach others going through separation. In the spirit of reconciliation, the Separation Guide acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today.